Today, 9 things every reefer should know about the science of live rock and aquascapes.
Certainly what we wish somebody had told us day one. Quick answer is you probably won't think of rock as science, but it supports the biology and habitat for the fish, corals, inverts, microcrustaceans, and bacteria. Aquascape design is also critical to proper flow, to breaking the boundary layer and pollution control as well. Today, you'll see why modern approaches to aquascaping just does all of this better than ever.
Second up today is rock is actually a habitat for fish. And this is something as a beginner that I forgot. When I was aquascaping, I just wanted something beautiful. And then there were no caves, no hiding places, nothing for the fish to sleep, to feel safe. So it's really important when you're designing these things that you think about where the fish can escape aggression, rest, and sleep.
Okay, so this is one of those things that never even occurred to me on my first tank. I just stacked the rock, try to make it look cool in my living room, and that was really it, right? Later on, I would figure out definitely that I want to create places where they can escape aggression. I want to create little nooks and crannies everywhere. I would then later on find out that I actually want to make it so they can hide in plain sight, because if the nook and crannies back here, man, that's where they're hiding. You'll never see them, right? No. So if you can create open areas for that. But then Elliot would show me that certain fish like certain areas, and so he told me the wrasses that I have like to live in rubble fields, you know? And so I built out a bunch of rubble and glued it together, and it looked kind of like one rock if you weren't looking too close, but it was really all this big rubble.
Pores, huh?
And there's holes all over it. And the moment that I built it, the wrasses shot right in it, and that's where they live. Literally within the hour almost. Okay, I would later then find out that, one of the best ways to do this and figure out where your fish like to live?
No.
Go to Google and search for that fish, find either videos or photos of it in its natural habitat, and you'll say, that's what it likes. Smart. I know, it's brilliant after you hear it. Elliot's wisdom again. So think about that, because what you're really doing here is not creating an aquascape for you. This is where these things live, and they have very specific environments that they live in the ocean that they will naturally gravitate to, and if you build it, they'll be happier and more secure in your tank, which means that they'll probably live longer and be happier as well.
Number 3, rock is not only habitat for fish, but it's also the habitat for our corals. Not only do they need a place to live, we need a place to be able to put them, but you also need to think about when you're building the aquascape, how will they get the nutrients they need in the proper flow, and how will they get rid of all those oxidants that are going to build up?
So yeah, habitat for the coral really means one of the ways we used to do this is build these walls.
Yep.
And that was great when they're all little frags, but when you build the walls, they end up just shattering each other. So if you can build it kind of as a 3D structure, with tiers, you see it in the 750 XXL where, that shelf really creates those tiers really, really easy.
Yeah.
And now they're growing kind of up instead of over each other and, strangling each other out from light. And then also the same thing with flow is you really got to try to figure out how you're going to build this aquascape so that you can get flow in and around everywhere, because all that tissue needs to get rid of all the oxidants. It needs to get rid of the excess hydrogen and low pH fluid within its water or within its own tissue. It needs to be able to have access to all the nutrients and everything that it's going to capture as well for energy production. So think about when you're going to do this. This is actually a good example. I think this might even come up later, but if I'm going to build for different corals, so if I got SPS corals, these things grow up, fairly rapidly. Whereas an LPS coral, your Euphilia or whatever,
branch out a lot.
It's kind of branched out, and they're actually a little easier to prune in some cases too. But they won't really, they'll kind of more fill in an area than grow up towards the sky. So think about this as habitat for the corals and the fish, and maybe aesthetics third. But you know what, really? When they all come together is when you really won.
Number 4, we can't forget all of our micro crustacean friends. Rock is a habitat for them, whether we're talking about pods or even things a little bit bigger, but specifically our micro crustaceans, they need a place to live, to thrive, to eat, nooks and crannies to find their food, so they need to have enough surface area for all that.
Yeah, one of the things is when you just have that kind of mound of rock, actually, it produced pretty healthy areas for the microcrustaceans because it was kind of hard for the fish and everything to get back into there.
Safety areas.
Yeah, and they could reproduce in there. Now with a lot of like NSA type scapes, you know, there's not really a lot of area.
Fish can access them everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So if there's a predator, those things might get wiped out. You can create little pockets. And so that's the video that we did on the HNSA, which is habitat negative space. So basically we would take something to a super negative space, and then we'd start just like building in, like taking little bits of rubble and gluing them together. So there's holes in there where these things can live, where most of the fish can't get into. So you can actually create those things intelligently. So if you're thinking about, I do have microcrustaceans and pods in my tank. I do want those because they're micro grazers. They also graze on things I don't like diatoms. Yeah. Where can I put those throughout the tank so that I don't have any of those issues? And it's habitat for everything. This is what we're doing with an aquascape.
Number 5, rock is actually one of the primary solutions to pollution in your tank. We always talk about the cycle and ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate, but you know what? When you have this rock and it becomes alive with all of those beneficial bacteria, it really keeps all of your livestock safe by turning things that are toxic into things that are non-toxic.
What it will also do is allow you to have flow in and out and around that helps you export. And export can be a bunch of different things we'll touch on in just a second. But that mound of rock that we all built 20 years ago that's just kind of stacked in the back, all the pollution in the tank would just go into those little holes, settle out, and just pollute the tank. It'd be behind the rock work, in the rock work, and then it was just done. And those things just like built up. And this is kind of one of those things that I always think of as the like old tank syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The decisions I made today won't be a problem in a month. It won't maybe be a problem for 18 months, but in 36 months, all the garbage, man. And then, you know, God forbid it ever gets disturbed, you know? And so what we want to do with our rockscape is make sure that our flow patterns can get behind the rock work. And like in these open areas, it's really easy to aim flow in there and make sure that it's getting in and around everywhere and keeping all of that organic material suspended in the water. And so when I say export, suspended in the water, you know, in many cases, exporting is because the polyps are actually capturing this stuff. And this is one of the primary sources of nitrogen and phosphorus. So we think of nitrate and phosphate in the water. That doesn't really exist in the ocean. They're undetectable levels. Like the corals are getting this from organics and stuff in the water, whether it be prey or even the same kind of detritus and stuff that spills out from fish waste or decaying organic matter. It's capturing these things, the amino acids and everything. We want that stuff suspended, not just decaying behind the rock or in the rock. So when you're building this, think about flow and how flow is going to help you produce something like better filtration and get the export of pollution out of the tank, either to your filtration or to the corals.
Number 6, rock is also the habitat for your microbiome, which we did a huge series on, and we learned a ton, both the good microbiome and the bad microbiome.
So, I mean, there is absolutely healthy bacteria and stuff we want in here, and they're going to come in on the rock or not on the rock, or you're going to have to add them later. You're also going to have some of the bad things, like dinos and diatoms and the cyanos of the world, all the icky slimes. So those are all habitats that likes to grow on the rock, most of these things. So thinking about that too when you're designing this thing, good flow can be helpful to that. But also, most of us are using dry rock these days. Okay, so one of the things that I really like now is thinking about how do I add some of that microbiome, because in our DNA testing, it doesn't just appear out of thin air quite the way like many of us would have thought. Some of it does. The stuff that processes ammonia will appear out of thin air, but what about all the rest? And so in that case, I think a good compromise here would be getting some rock from the ocean that has been aquacultured. Like I think there's a place called Salty Bottom that does it. There is Tampa Bay Saltwater. That's my first rock that I ever got in my life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they just drop this rock out in the ocean and let it cure. Now, one of the things that they do, though, is it's going to come with all kinds of life on it, corals and all this other stuff on it if you buy the rock. But what you can also do is, I don't really actually want all the photosynthetics on there, and they sell like rubble or base rock, and so you can get some of that rubble or base rock, put it in your sump
Smart.
outside of the light. And then all this stuff will migrate throughout the tank.
Get all that good microbiome and the bad photosynthetic stuff stay in the dark. Yeah, that's smart.
The photosynthetic stuff, the reason I say that is, even though while it might be cool, is it is opportunistic. And the biggest source of energy will be light. And so in a brand new tank, whatever has like the biggest source of energy was probably going to take over the fastest. Okay. And so I don't want those photosynthetics in a brand new tank. Like I prefer to keep them down in the sump for the most part. And so you can mix and match this thing. Think about, where am I going to get that source of microbiome from? Another one is actually the ocean direct sand.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We DNA tested it, and sure enough, man, it says it has the microbiome of the sea. Sure enough, it does. Surprise, surprise. You know what? I thought it was really cool when we figured that out. We matched the same like microbiome as many other surfaces, like established tanks, even sand like out of the ocean. It was pretty impressive. So think about rock as a place where you're gonna have microbiome. Sometimes you need to seed it.
Number 7, there are 3 main styles of aquascaping, and we already touched on that first one, which is that traditional stack of rocks that you literally just put across the back of the tank and usually up against the back wall. There's nothing wrong with this style. There are some downsides and upsides, of course, but this style can give a lot of habitat for fish, because inside there's usually lots of caves and open areas for those fish to escape, and to sleep as well. But another problem of that's going to be there's going to be fewer areas to swim through. There's going to be a larger network of holes as well, places where all that fish food, all that fish waste will just eventually collect over time, maybe even lead to that dreaded old tank syndrome.
Yeah, all that stuff collected in and behind the rocks work. The 3D or the like kind of 2D structure often has less surface area for coral mounting than a 3D structure, and visually kind of less interesting. Mm-hmm. One of the things though that's really come up for me with that kind of style, now you could fix this if you want, but most of the time is it's just a stack of rocks that's maybe been supported a little bit in a couple of ways. If you ever have to move this tank, dude, it's gonna be really hard.
Really hard.
You're never gonna be able to pull it out and reassemble it. But like when you have something like this, which is largely just one piece here, if you can just like pick this thing up out of the tank all in one piece, man, and you're done. It was just that easy. That isn't just because I wanted to move the tank. It's also because, I got a fish in there that, he grew up and he just started harassing everybody. That little 6-line wrasse, maybe he was okay to begin, but now he's like killing his neighbors and stuff. Yeah. I need to get him out. The tang outgrew the tank. I need to get him out. Well, you know what? Like, you can sit there with the fish trap forever and maybe that works, but if you are not good at that, which is me, I see other people here with immense amounts of patience where they just stare at this thing waiting for 4 hours and they catch them. I don't have that. What I do have is I can just lift the aquascape out of the tank and then just scoop the fish out. So the rock stack doesn't really lend itself to that. So I think there are ways to do this even better.
Number 8, the second type of aquascape is one of Ryan's favorite. I watched videos of yours that were over an hour and they were fantastic. We're talking about the NSA or negative space aquascape. These can be absolutely some of the most visually impressive, and they can also be some of the longest time consumers to put together because you have to have a lot of patience to do these.
I mean, patience or just desire to be creative. Either way, it could be the same thing. It'd probably take a little while. This, for me, NSA means negative space. Yep. So as much as I'm concerned about, where do I put the rock, it's also where do I not put the rock, so that it gives that, sense of 3D perception and depth, and like that you can swim through everywhere. Okay, so this all came from me where TSA built an aquascape for me. They use this Haitian rock that is really, really lends itself to this. If you go look for Haitian rock, you're gonna be super disappointed. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay, everybody who sees this tank, by the way, first thing they say is, that aquascape is awesome. Yeah, that's cool. All, like it is, it is very, very impressive. But like for me as a content creator, that is useless to all of you. Here, man, I got this really awesome thing that you can't do. Yeah. Okay. So on one of my vacations, I sat in my driveway and I was like, you know what? I bet you if you break Marco apart, I could recreate that thing almost exactly, to the point that the average person wouldn't be able to see it, and then just glue it together. And that was the, kind of generation of NSA. We sat around and said, what do we call this? And that's what it is. And so that's what you do. So this is what this is. This is, all one piece of Marco now, because we cemented it together. And, you can go watch that video. But it's all just pieces of Marco rock that we created to create one cool aquascape. And it's really, really, you could not get me to not do this. It would probably be the most favorite part of setting up a tank. I will tell you, a brand new person who's doing this for the very first time probably just really wants to get it going.
Yep.
But if this is your second or third tank, man, like, you now enjoy the process of getting all of the stuff right. And I will tell you, you'll be frustrated. You'll build it, because I'm still get frustrated with it. You'll build it and not right. And I'll just take it apart and I'll do it again. And I'll take it apart and I'll do it again. And Dave over here behind the camera is laughing because he's right there with me. But when we're done, we're like, yeah, man, it really came together. Now, there was a downfall to this, and we'll hit it in the next. But sometimes that really, really cool negative space doesn't leave enough room for the fish, and it was the evolution of the next type of aquascape.
Number 9, our third type of aquascape that we just hinted at is the HNSA, or the negative space aquascape with some habitat.
Yeah, this was simple, man. It is not as negative. It actually kind of bridges the gap between a little bit aspects of the wall and your traditional NSA. And I will say, I believe that if you were just looking at the scape alone, most people say visually the NSA is cooler.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But once you start building in all that habitat, man, it is as simple as just gluing some pieces in various places with little rubble. And then when you put the seam in there with a little bit of the cement in there or the epoxy, and then cover it with the sand, you can't even see the seams. Yeah. And so it just looks like this little area where fish can go in, and you can create coves, and you can create all kinds of different things. But that's what you need to do. Is I'd almost build the NSA first,
right? And then just add in some?
Yeah, and then come back and say, all right, so where are my fish actually going to live in that? Smart. Ask yourself that question, and it's actually pretty easy. And then go to Google again, and you'll see that all of these wrasses, they don't live in reefs in many cases. They live in fields of rubble zones, right? Cool. And so it's just rubble zones as far as the eye can see, and they're just shooting in and out of this thing in by the hundreds or thousands,
cool.
man.
I've seen those videos, yeah.
Very, very cool. So think about the HNSA. This is probably one of the final evolutions of where the hobby needs to go. I want to create something visually interesting. I want to have something that allows for flow in and around the corals, habitat for the corals. It allows for getting pollution out of the tank. I can actually pick one out piece and move it and take care of the whole thing. All of this together, I think this is probably one of the areas that most of us would benefit from the most.
My number 1 takeaway is take your time with the aquascape. Yes, you can still just put a whole bunch of stacked rocks on the back, but you'll probably be a lot happier. Not necessarily if you spend an entire week that I think Ryan did once building something like this, but even if you do, a quarter of that time, really plan it out. Make something that's visually appealing, that is not off the back, that has good flow all around it, and then just add a few habitats in there. I promise you, you're gonna be staring at this for the life of your tank, and taking the time to aquascape the way you want it is gonna pay off.
There is a caveat in all of that, which is it doesn't have to actually be all that hard. There are things like Carib Sea shapes. They've already done the work for you by gluing this stuff together. They've done basically the same thing, and they've turned it into purple.
That's what I use.
Yeah, and it stacks and creates something very, very similar. You're paying them to kind of do it for you, and you're kind of stuck with the shapes that they produce. I think this is a Real Reef's version of that same thing. And then here is Aquaforest, same kind of deal. So you can get these things already pre-made. I know the arches from Carib Sea, super popular.
Awesome. Yeah.
It won't be the exact same creation process that you had before, and it's a little harder to match the purple if you want to add more stuff on. But all the same, you don't have to do it the hard way. There are easier ways as well. All right, my number 1 takeaway here is the HNSA is obviously for me, and I actually believe the future of reefing, building not just for ease or our eyes, but for the biology of the animals and corals, and then supporting filtration and flow as well. What's next? How to select the right rock solutions. Let's get it right the first time.
And the best of our aquascape and rock playlist right here.